This is a video discussion of the case study entitled Whole Foods Market, a Luxury Grocer in Detroit. And basically what this discussion, what this particular case study or article was about was Whole Foods Market. It's kind of like a high-end grocery store, and this particular market or particular grocery store was built basically by assimilating different businesses, different companies purchasing one another and growing into what we know as the market, as the Whole Foods market. Now, this article focused on the process, and the implementation of putting one of their stores in the Detroit market area. And what kind of impacts, what kind of thought process went along with that. So the first question at hand we're going to see here was it appropriate to expand the Detroit Whole Foods model to other markets? Now, this is a multifaceted question that comes to mind when we think of the appropriateness of whether they should move them into that market. Now, Austin was one of the key decision makers there at Whole Foods, and he had a few factors to consider when thinking about the success of the Detroit area and if we should move this model to other areas. And one was the history, two was the culture, three was going to be the industry trends, and lastly, but certainly not least, is the socioeconomic implications that it would have expanding that same model to these other areas. Now, using the PESTEL, which is an anagram, we can analyze kind of what Austin was going through, what he was thinking, and how he was able to make the decision, not only of the success of the Detroit area, but if we should move that market onto other areas as well. This is PESTEL it stands for the different environmental factors that we would have to consider in order to have a successful business. And the P stands for political, which I think Whole Foods took advantage of, especially Austin, when he was conducting his 2-year pre-set up data in the Detroit market. He was talking to politicians, to nonprofits, to different organizations to see how well or how accepted they would be. Politically, taking advantage of a lot of tax incentives for setting up shop in the Detroit area. Economic, there's definitely were a lot of analytics that went into the Whole Foods placement in the Detroit area. What was the per capita income? Was that enough to support them? How was the traffic? I think Austin considered the hospital as well as the school in that high traffic area into his decision making to have one in the Detroit area. Social also goes along with that, the S in PESTEL. The social factors were how well would they be accepted? Were those people used to the high-end or healthier food options that Whole Foods provided? Would they be able to afford them? Many factors like that. Excuse me. The T stands for technology. And I think with the T, Austin didn't consider what type of effects the technology would have. I know it was a grocery store. Maybe they weren't that technologically focused, but I think it should have definitely been, maybe not a key factor, but definitely something to consider when thinking about these models, thinking about what areas we're going to move, what models are we going to move to different areas. The E in PESTEL was the environmental. Which are we going to support the local grocers? What type of products are we going to sell? What does that say about our reputation, our strategy as a business? The L, legal. I don't think Austin focused on the legal aspects so much. mostly because Whole Foods was definitely kind of like an outstanding citizen in regards to the business. There wasn't any too many legal implications to what they were doing. Everything was pretty straight in line for them. Now, in regards to the environment that we've been talking about, there's different ways that we can analyze the strategies that different businesses use in a more generic sense, in order to get a better feel for comparability, for benchmarking different items. And those strategies include cost leadership, which in the case study they talk about Walmart being a cost leader. Now, Walmart has the benefit of what many economists call the economies of scale. And what that means is they basically buy goods in large quantities to hopefully get a lower cost per unit because of their purchasing power. And then hopefully pass those savings or that discounted price onto the customer so that hopefully they get more customers purchasing more products, and then they can thus benefit by having huge volumes of sales so that even with a small profit margin, they're still able to generate a lot of revenue. Now, differentiation, in the case study, they give the example of Nordstrom. Now, Nordstrom is a clothing boutique, kind of upscale designer clothing boutique that has really great customer service and an overall good kind of unique niche market that they have in regards to the clothing industry, the industry that they're in. Now, they're not very focused on cost, as their products are higher in price than what maybe something in Walmart would be charging. So that does differentiate them that way. They're kind of focused more on that. The next is going to be focused cost leadership. Now, focused cost leadership is going to be a little bit different than the Walmart example. In the case study, they actually give the example of Dollar General. Now, Dollar General kind of does what Walmart does. They do have a lot of economies of scale, lower prices that they target to. They don't have the variety or the amount of products that Walmart does. So in that way, they are focused. Even though they're still worried about cost and giving that lower cost to the customer, they're focused only on a certain number of products, variety of products, and they discount those to get those out the door. And lastly, we have the focus differentiation. Now, focus differentiation is going to be a really unique store. It's not going to be so sensitive to cost or worried about cost. And it's not necessarily going to serve the wide customer array that Nordstrom would, but it's kind of somewhere in the middle as far as serving a very niche market, very unique items, and not like a whole lot of those. What I think about Whole Foods is that it's going to be a focused differentiation. Now, the reason I come to this conclusion is because with regards to cost, they aren't so cost focused as they are producing or they are giving a higher quality product. But at the same time, they're not doing the volume that Walmart would do. So with this, I think they're doing a focused differentiation, which means that they're focused on their specific customers that they want to serve with a specific amount of products, grocery products, and not expanding into large retail, different commercial products, house products, things like that you would see at Walmart or something like that. So in that way, I do think they are focused differentiation as their generic strategy that Whole Foods has. Now, what would I do? If it was up to me, I would focus on the markets that we knew from experience, from previous data, from our history as Whole Foods company, that would show us that these markets are ones that we would be well accepted to, that were needed, that the business would grow and expand, but most importantly, the markets with which are aligned with our growth strategy and with our strategic model. Now we know from different examples in the book that some companies can go through extremely hard times if they stray too far from their original business model or too far from their company's strategy. Now, after I've saturated those markets in those regions that we knew we were accepted, that went in line with our reputation, went in line with our corporate strategy, then I would start experimenting with these other markets, such as like the Detroit area and other areas that maybe didn't match our normal customer base or our normal strategy as a business. And that's pretty much what I would do with that. Now, I did want to talk about the triple bottom line. Now, with the triple bottom line is basically it's kind of a spin-off of the normal bottom line, which is basically has to do with social, environmental, and economic factors. Now, given these factors, social, we already talked about how Whole Foods performed. Environmental, how they were conscious of the environment that they were going into. But the last one is economic. That's the one we're most familiar with, the financial gain aspect, profitability. Are we going to be profitable? Are we going to be able to sustain the employment in the region that we are in? Are we going to continue to provide these healthier products to these people once we're in that market? It's very, very important, very key to operations. We do need that profitability. Now, I do think that having those three lines may not work for all companies. For Whole Foods, it definitely, most certainly did. They were conscious of the environment, conscious of their social, supporting nonprofits, supporting their environment, and giving jobs to those in the community, as well as, by the numbers that we see in the case study, continuing to produce that economic growth. And that'll be all. Thank you.